I put water in here to be like, oh, I'm gonna hydrate myself, and then but it was LaCroix, or
Oh,
Qua, or whatever. So it's doing the opposite of like making my throat more scratchy. It's not like
you should have. You should have. That should have been a pointer in the art of the pitch. Don't drink LaCroix.
yeah, because it doesn't lubricate your throat well enough.
Also,
Okay.
LaCroix, please sponsor us.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Bloodhound Pix, the podcast. I am one of your hosts, Craig.
And this is Josh.
And this is Kyle.
Okay, this episode of Indie-stry, we're going to be talking about a kind of very subjective topic of what makes a bad movie. Now, the three of us have kind of been doing our a shout out to Ginger Nuts of Horror, who gave us kind of this opportunity, and we've been doing this thing where we review movies based on our three personal opinions, and we've actually had some decent success and got to watch some great movies and not so great movies and anywhere in between. And so kind of one topic that comes up, of course, once you start reviewing things and once you have people either retweeting it or certain people following you or whatever, which it's not a ton, but this topic comes up of like what makes a good movie or a bad movie to you. We're specifically talking about a bad movie, and especially for the three of us who do watch, even for our own personal enjoyment, movies that by film scholar standards may be seen as quote unquote bad. So then if those are bad, then where's that line, and what is the discussion that we're going to have on it? And so this kind of topic also is coming out in January and February, which is well known within the kind of theater release date area of studios that don't want or don't think a movie is going to do well, or they just have some films that are in backstock. They will dump their movies during this time because you're not having as many kids on break who will be the ones going to the theaters. You're not, in a lot of the country, it's colder. You're dealing with harsher weather, so there's less likely to have theatrical attendance. So why not dump the movies we don't think are as good? Which then, sometimes you have these movies that maybe not, but also that they are these great gems that were released then and didn't do well, but then, you find out a couple years down the road they become kind of this success that you wish, wow, if you just released that at a different time, it would have done a lot better and we could have more stuff like that and so on. So I'll move the conversation to Josh or Kyle, whoever wants to take it, about kind of this idea of a bad movie and our experiences of kind of reviewing. And we won't give any names. We won't, if you read any of our reviews on Ginger Nuts, you'll probably see for yourself. But yeah. So you guys, what in your mind separates not purposefully bad, but the unintentionally bad movie?
So are we not allowed to use actual examples? Because we have plenty of those that we could highlight.
Yeah, go for it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, this
Kyle can edit it out if it's
if you have regrets, we can always cut it out.
Well, since Craig, since you started talking, the thing that keeps popping into my head is the one that almost fucking broke me, which was Groupers.
Oh,
I thought you were gonna say
yeah.
a different one, but okay,
Well,
yeah, go with Groupers.
I mean,
Oh God.
there obviously, like I said, there could be, there's other examples, but I think for me personally, that was the one that almost broke me. I mean, and there are so many things wrong with that movie. So it's a subjective kind of viewpoint, of course, but it don't, with something like that, it's almost like, what wasn't wrong with it, because there's so much that doesn't work. Even something, as kind of harmless, I guess, is the best word I can think of to describe it, as having characters talk nonstop, right? There's zero action in the film ever, but there's a lot of talking, and it wears on you. I mean, fuck, the runtime wasn't that film like 2 hours long? It could have been 2 minutes long. So, I mean, not to rag on that too much, but it needs fucking ragged on.
He's not wrong. I don't want to be mean, but it's totally true. Trying to be nice, but yeah, it's pretty awful. But to Josh's point, so often I think what makes a bad movie starts with the story, starts with a narrative. That one in particular, you can clearly say it just feels like they're treading water and biding their time. I'm sure due to budgetary reasons, which is understandable, but rather than having a story that continually unfolds. So we're seeing things that are not relevant, are not important, are not necessary, and you lose interest naturally. So that is certainly a huge, huge thing. We all know.
I think there's this stigma too, because even though short films are, thanks to Shudder, will sometimes post a short film, or there's some other websites that will do it, and that's great. I love a good short film, but there is a stigma about short films, and I know a lot of people that are up and coming, or where they despise the idea of a short film, and that they'd rather, so if they are fortunate enough to get 10 grand to spend, instead of making a very decent short film with 10 grand, you can make a good one, and you can make a good short film on no budget. Not necessarily that, but they would rather make a whole feature for 10 grand, and then they'll try and submit it to festivals. But the thing about festivals, which we talked about in previous episodes, the screenwriting contest, which maybe we'll get into festivals another date, but it's actually easier to get a short film into a festival, and which you'll kind of learn, because a lot of them don't have the space to put in an hour-and-a-half movie, so unless, and there's even, because of all these festivals and because of the way the market is now, you have some bigger names like doing these festival circuits, and even these smaller festival circuits. So it's I guess the competition is getting tougher, and it's just way more because anybody can really shoot on an iPhone. Anybody can shoot on the equipment you basically have at your disposal, that most people do. And so here, I'll let one of them talk a little bit more, but no, that's kind of the stigma that pops up. And going off of what Josh was saying, kind of asking a question back, because there are movies that, for example, like The Room, which is considered to be we've obviously seen ones that I prefer The Room over, but The Room in itself, is supposed to be the worst movie ever made. That's how it's marketed. That's how people talk about it, and but yet it has this huge kind of following. It has that people for years now, I know individuals that, you know, anytime it comes to their city, they go to a screening of it. And, you know, it's almost like Rocky Horror Picture Show or something like that, where people say the lines with the movie, and it's become this whole kind of cultural phenomenon. And there's even, you know, there's a Disaster Artist, which is about the making of that movie. And so, you know, what, you know, sets something apart like that, like The Room, which, you know, if it's so bad, that means it failed to fire, you know, on all cylinders in a way. Then something, as Josh was saying, like Groupers, that also, in his opinion, failed to fire with all cylinders. So, like, kind of, how is it different? Is it because there's a humor level to The Room because of it that you're kind of able to look over, or I don't know. I'll have Josh talk on that if he's willing to, or Kyle.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, in terms of you know, kind of looking at the issues, at least, you know, again, it's purely subjective, so I'm just talking about myself, but the issues that Groupers has, again, I'm not trying to rag on this, so, and I really hope that the person that made that isn't listening, but actually, you know what, fuck it, I kind of hope they are. The things about Groupers that didn't work in my view versus the things that don't work in The Room, you know, are completely different. And it almost is like, you know, in this topic, is The Room even, you know, does it even qualify? Because, I mean, Groupers is not inept. You know, The Room is totally inept in every way. It's like somebody that doesn't know how to do anything regarding film production made that film, versus Groupers, which is very well made, like technically, you know, and it just doesn't have a story among 1,000 other things. So I guess, you know, in terms of this specific topic, you know, does The Room even qualify to be part of it? I'm not so sure. I mean, it's the lowest hanging fruit in a sense, you know, so, and it's been shit talked for when was it made? In the late 90s? So going on 20
like
years.
Yeah, 2000.
Okay, yeah, I knew.
I can't remember.
Yeah, it was a while ago, but yeah, so I mean, that's, I guess, something to consider is, you know, with something like Groupers, you know, clearly the intention was not to make something god awful, and clearly it wasn't due to, you know, being inept at making a film, because that's clearly not the problem. It's just every fucking thing else.
Yeah, I think The Room is so. I think there's a weird difference, and you can't pinpoint why it happens, but like they're both not great movies, but for whatever reason, there's a comedic value in the failure of The Room. You know, that sometimes you watch other movies that are bad and there's just nothing, there's not some redeeming quality in the failure to make a good film. But I also think like there's a cult thing too, you know, like I'm sure we all have movies that we like that are objectively not successful at their intentions as a film, but you, for whatever reason, you saw it when you were a kid or you saw it with a friend, and there's a kind of a bonding cult secret thing. It's almost the same thing that happens with us with like horror films, where it's like, you know, the people that like them, and there's these people that don't or don't understand them, and there's like a special secret bond you have that kind of can elevate those things.
No, that all makes sense. Going off of kind of what they both said, for me too, and I liked what Josh was saying about the technical quality of with something like Groupers, and that's what, when I'm as I think Kyle has mentioned, I'm probably the nicest one in terms of how I phrase certain things, even for our reviews. And but the one thing that when I will finally break is what, and I don't want, in terms of, I don't want to say the word lazy, because even to do bare minimum on a film set is tough work, and I give the credit to the crews and stuff like that. But I don't know, even this might go off of what we kind of talked about in our pitching episode, but a lack of passion from the people making it. And that's where I'll kind of start to draw the line. If I see a movie that just feels like they're making it to jump on a bandwagon, that technically it looks nice and whatever, they had the right cameras and all that, but if they jumped on the bandwagon because The Conjuring was popular and they wanted to make something that was like The Conjuring, but there is no artistic vision to it, they're just again banking off of The Conjuring audience that want to see movies like that. That's for me kind of where, and a lot of these movies aren't necessarily, I wouldn't say they're bad in terms of like they're more like that mediocre thing, and that's more the frustrating element, because you see a lot of people that have these passion projects that are really want to make it, and it's great and it's motivating, and I love supporting indie people, but then to see these ones where they're just kind of throw it out there to make a quick buck, I think that's where, for me, the most frustrating part, I guess, without repeating myself.
Now you're speaking my language. These are a lot of the movies we have unfortunately had to review, and they're like the most fucking annoying things ever to watch. I want to like destroy my fucking TV when I watch them, because a lot of them, like Craig already said, are just uninspired. Even in conception, like you look at the log line and you go, okay, this is generic and doesn't sound like there could be a lot. Maybe it'll surprise me, and it doesn't. And it just feels like they're walking through it, like everyone is phoning it in. And that's the thing that definitely calls back to the pitching episode, in terms of, if there's no passion, just get the fuck out of here. There's no point. I'd much rather see a movie that's imperfect and flawed, but it has some kind of spirit or energy to it, than something that's like technically amazing and dead. It is like an organic thing, and you can kind of tell. And I think that's another thing why there are some why there is that weird line between good or bad, where there are some films that are kind of technically bad, but they have something to them that excites you or entertains you or makes you laugh, or you can kind of feel there is some passion to it.
That just reminds me of I think that's like the best kind of description of how I felt about Body Melt was. It's not good, but
Yes.
You can tell that they're really into it, and they're they're trying to at least make something that people are gonna connect with, or just fucking flat out like. They probably didn't work. It probably doesn't work that way. But I mean, you can sure as shit tell that they were, passionate about it, and that they, were trying at least.
It's like the underdog thing. You want to, root for them. You want to, the people that aren't going to win, or they come out and they, at least they did it, and repeating what they are. Josh and Kyle said perfectly, that they enjoyed doing it, or, cared. And it is a thing, I think Kyle kind of hit on the nose, that it's hard to describe in terms of words, but you can feel it when you're watching it. And if you two have anything more.
And just to continue, I think it also, now this occurred to me. It's also kind of what art has, like every artistic thing is a risk. I think that's part of it too, you know, where like the walking through it, phoning it in, you can feel that no one's taking a risk. But really, you know, anything that we write could turn out to be a shitty script. We're going to sit down and go, I have this idea I think could be cool, could suck. But you have to you can feel when people aren't taking that risk. And when they don't, it's just so hard to watch.
Okay. And then to change subjects a little bit now, the other thing that happens that you can see it in comedies a lot, but also in horror, since you know this is a horror podcast, we'll discuss more on that, but I'll use some of the comedy references, is that for studios, especially if they're reading, for my example, a comedy script, and you submit it, and it's funny, and they're laughing, and you know, then they ask for like some rewrites and stuff like that, and then if they're reading that script, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, obviously the jokes are going to not be as funny. You know, obviously if it's a horror movie, the scares are not going to be as scary as that first time you read it. So in their minds, what they're thinking is that, oh, well, then it's not funny anymore. It's not scary anymore, because they're looking at it from somebody that's read it so many times. And we'll kind of hopefully get into this when we're talking about the role of screenwriter, which will be later on as a hired screenwriter. But the idea is then they hire somebody new, hire another writer to go and bring in this fresh blood in, and they, you know, the writer writes new jokes, and then they read it for this first time because they're new jokes, and they think, oh, it's hilarious, it's fresh, it's funny. But then what happens is now you have a first draft that is being kind of put into production, where the draft that was rewritten, you know, 10 times, 11, however many, that was a more fine-tuned script that for people that hadn't read it, that hadn't seen the movie yet, they would have thought it was hysterical. But now you're kind of getting this script that, you know, isn't as completed as it could be. And I think that's kind of another thing, is that the rewriting process is more important than the writing process. Than the first draft, which is, in a way, the first draft is like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
True that. That's definitely a weird thing that happens. And I think we could attest to that even in like our screenwriting program, where you are reading constant like revisions of someone's script that you might really like in the beginning. And it's not that it's not getting better, but there is a certain point where you kind of become overexposed to something, and it's hard for you to like react freshly when you've seen something continue to evolve. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah.
Or write a scene that Neil doesn't like.
Those are all only kind of scenes I write.
That is true. Thankfully, I only had one of those.
But that goes back to first drafts, though, too, which I feel like what Craig said about them is the perfect philosophy. Is it's what sticks. It's not, for some people it might not be, but for a lot of people you're just throwing, here's all the ideas I have. This is definitely not the final version or the best version, or this is just whatever, and you could get rid of a ton of it. So like, go easy.
Does anybody else have any more to say on the subject?
I don't know. I think we covered it.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
so
for something as daunting as why does this movie suck, I think we answered it.
Yeah, to the best of our ability. Of course,
Yeah.
You know, as we said before, any movie is subjective. We're just saying from kind of his personal experience of like what we believe to be the topic. I think we did a decent job going. We were all kind of nervous going into it. But so moving forward, this, of course, if you disagree, if you have any comments of your own on it, if you want to just message in general, yes, shoot us a comment, like, follow, do whatever. We're trying to incorporate. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And when we start bringing in guests, which will be in the next coming months, we're going to have a slew of professionals that may be able to answer some of these questions even better than us, or a lot better than us.
Way better than us.
Yeah, definitely way better than us. But and then of course we'll use those questions and you get to hear them on the airwaves, your own question. But thank you for listening, and again, it's always a pleasure.
Adios.
Bloodhound Pix podcast is produced by Josh Lee, Craig Draheim, and Kyle Hintz. Music by Raymond Seed. Audio editing by Kyle Hintz.